Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well tonight. This evening, we are going to be reading through chapter 61 of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. We're getting very close to the end of the book now. It's been a long time. It's a very long book. If this is your first time watching, we are not just reading the words. We're stopping and talking about interesting vocabulary words and phrases. So if you're learning English and you're an advanced learner, then this is a great way to learn new vocabulary and new phrases. I'm doing this live, so if you're watching this live with me, then I encourage you to ask questions about words that you don't understand or phrases that aren't clear to you, and I will be happy to stop and explain them to you. That's the whole point of doing a video like this, is to answer your questions, to talk about words that are interesting to you. If you don't ask questions, I will just stop sometimes and explain words that I think maybe you don't know, or words that could probably be very useful to you, or phrases that maybe you don't understand. So definitely ask questions. That's the whole point of this video. All right, now let's begin with chapter 61 of David Copperfield, which is titled, I am shown two interesting penitents. To be penitent means to feel sorry for something bad you've done. So somehow Davy is going to encounter, I guess, two people who feel very badly about what they have done. For a time, at all events until my book should be completed, which would be the work of several months, I took up my abode in my aunt's house. We've seen that word abode before, which means where you live, the place where you live. So you can call your house your abode. Most people don't. You usually don't use that word, but you could use the word abode to mean the place where you live. So he's just saying, I was living at my aunt's house in Dover. And there, sitting in the window from which I had looked out at the moon upon the sea, when that roof first gave me shelter, I quietly pursued my task. In pursuance of my intention of referring to my own fictions only when their course should incidentally connect itself with the progress of my story, I do not enter on the aspirations and delights, anxieties and triumphs of my art. That I truly devoted myself to it with my strongest earnestness and bestowed upon it energy of my soul. Every energy of my soul. I have already said, if the books I have written be of any worth, they will supply the rest. I shall otherwise have written to poor purpose, and the rest will be of interest to no one. Occasionally, I went to London to lose myself in the swarm of life there, or to consult with Traddles on some business point. He had managed for me in my absence, with the soundest judgment, and my worldly affairs were prospering. And my notoriety, to have notoriety means to be famous. My notoriety began to bring upon me an enormous quantity of letters from people of whom I had no knowledge, chiefly about nothing, and extremely difficult to answer. I agreed with Traddles to have my name painted upon his door. There, the devoted postman on that beat delivered bushels of letters for me. And there, at intervals, I labored through them, like a Home Secretary of State without the salary. Among this correspondence there dropped in, every now and then, an obliging proposal from one of the numerous outsiders always lurking in the Commons. To lurk somewhere means to be standing somewhere in a corner. Wait, I just want to check the official definition of lurk. Hiding somewhere, waiting to attack. So there's always someone lurking about the commons, hiding, waiting to attack. To practice under cover of my name, if I would take the necessary steps remaining, to make a proctor of myself, and pay me a percentage on the profits. But I declined these offers, being already aware that there were plenty of such covert practitioners in existence, and considering the commons quite bad enough, without my doing anything to make it worse. The girls had gone home. When my name burst into bloom on Traddles' door, and the sharp boy looked all day as if he had never heard of Sophie, shut up in a back room, glancing down from her work in a sooty little strip of garden with a pump in it. But there I always found her, the same bright housewife, often humming her Devonshire ballads. A ballad is a type of song. When no strange foot was coming up the stairs and blunting the sharp boy in his official closet with melody. I wondered at first why I so often found Sophie writing in a copybook, and why she always shut it up when I appeared, and hurried it into the table drawer. But the secret soon came out. One day, Traddles, who had just come home through the drizzling sleet from court. You know, sleet is wet snow. It's like the combination of water and snow. It's very unpleasant. Took a paper out of his desk and asked me what I thought of that handwriting. "Oh, don't, Tom!" cried Sophie, who was warming his slippers before the fire. "My dear," returned Tom in a delighted state, "why not? What do you say to that writing, Copperfield?" "It's extraordinarily legal and formal," said I. "I don't think I ever saw such a stiff hand." "Not like a lady's hand, is it?" said Traddles. "A lady's?" I repeated. "Bricks and mortar are more like a lady's hand." Traddle broke out into a rapturous laugh and informed me that it was Sophie's writing, and that Sophie had vowed and declared, vow was like a promise, and declared he would need a copying clerk soon, and she would be that clerk, and she had acquired this hand from a pattern, and she could throw off, I forget how many folios an hour. Sophie was very much confused by my being told all of this, and said that when Tom was made a judge, he wouldn't be so ready to proclaim it, which Tom denied, averring that he should always be equally proud of it under all circumstances. "What a thoroughly good and charming wife she is, my dear Traddles," said I, when she had gone away, laughing. "My dear Copperfield," returned Traddles, "she is, without any exception, the dearest girl. The way she manages this place, her punctuality means being on time, never being late, domestic knowledge, economy, and order, her cheerfulness, Copperfield. Indeed, you have reason to commend her," I returned. "You are a happy fellow, I believe. You make yourselves and each other two of the happiest people in the world." "I'm sure we are two of the happiest people," returned Traddles. "I admit that, at all events. Bless my soul, when I see her getting up by candlelight on these dark mornings, busying herself in the day's arrangements, going out to market before the clerks come into the inn, caring for no weather, devising the most capital little dinners out of the plainest materials. Plain means simple. Making puddings and pies, keeping everything in its right place. Always so neat and ornamental herself, sitting up at night with me. If it's ever so late, sweet-tempered and encouraging always. And all for me. I positively sometimes can't believe it, Copperfield. He was tender of the very slippers she had been warming, as he put them on and stretched his feet enjoyingly upon the fender. I positively sometimes can't believe it, said Traddles. Then our pleasures, dear me, they are inexpensive, but they are quite wonderful. When we are at home here of an evening, and shut the outer door, and draw those curtains. Drawing the curtains means opening or closing them. I think it really means closing them here. Drawing the curtains, closing the curtains. Which she made. Where could we be more snug? Snug means warm and comfortable. When it's fine, and when we go out for a walk in the evening, the streets abound in enjoyment for us everywhere. We look into the glittering windows of the jeweler's shop, and I show Sophie which of the diamond-eyed serpents coiled up on white satin rising grounds I would give her if I could afford it, and Sophie shows me which of the gold watches that are capped and jeweled and engine turned and possessed of the horizontal lever escape movement and all sorts of things she would buy for me if she could afford it. And we pick out the spoons and forks and fish slices and butter knives and sugar tongs. We should both prefer if we could both afford it. And really we go away as if we had got them. Then, when we stroll into the squares and great streets and see houses to let means to rent. And see houses to let, houses to rent. Sometimes we look up at it and say, how would that do if I was made a judge? And we parcel it out. Such a room for us, such rooms for the girls, and so forth, until we settle to our satisfaction that it would do, or it wouldn't do, as the case may be. Sometimes we go at half price to the pit of the theater, the very smell of which is cheap, in my opinion, at the money, and there we thoroughly enjoy the play, which Sophie believes every word of, and so do I. And walking home, perhaps, we buy a little bit of something at a cook's shop, or a little lobster at the fishmonger's, and bring it here, and make a splendid supper, chatting about what we have seen. Now you know, Copperfield, if I was Lord Chancellor, we couldn't do this. You would do something, whatever you were, my dear Traddles, thought I, that would be pleasant and amiable. By the way, I said aloud, I suppose you never draw any skeletons now? When Traddles was a boy and they were in school, all of those boys were abused very much at school by the people who ran the school. Abused by beating and hurting them. And so they were all very miserable and unhappy together. And the way that Traddles dealt with being abused and all the pain, he used to draw little pictures of skeletons all over everything, his books, papers, everything. And now Davy, many years later, is saying, do you still draw skeletons? Really, replied Traddles, laughing and reddening. I can't wholly deny that I do, my dear Copperfield, for being in one of the back rows of the King's Bench on the other day, with a pen in my hand, the fancy came into my head to try how I had preserved that accomplishment. And I'm afraid there's a skeleton in a wig on the ledge of the desk. So he said, yes, actually, I was sitting in court the other day and I had a pen, and the temptation came, and I drew on the back of the bench a skeleton wearing a wig, like one of the judges. After we both had laughed heartily, Traddles wound up by looking with a smile at the fire and saying in his forgiving way, "Old Creakle." Creakle was the man who used to beat them at school. "I have a letter from that old rascal here," said I, for I never was less disposed to forgive him the way that he used to batter means beat, batter Traddles, than when I saw Traddles so ready to forgive him himself. "From Creakle, the schoolmaster?" exclaimed Traddles. "No." "Among the persons who are attracted to me in my rising fame and fortune," said I, looking over my letters, "and who discover that they were always much attached to me, is the self-same Creakle. He is not a schoolmaster now, Traddles. He is retired. He is a Middlesex magistrate." I thought Traddles might be surprised to hear it, but he was not at all. "How do you suppose he comes to be a Middlesex magistrate?" said I. "Oh, dear me," replied Traddles. "It would be very difficult to answer that question. Perhaps he voted for somebody, or lent money to somebody, or bought something for somebody, or otherwise obliged somebody, or jobbed for somebody, who knew somebody who got the lieutenant of the county to nominate him for the commission. On the commission he is, at any rate," said I, "and he writes to me here that he will be glad to show me in operation the only true system of prison discipline, the only unchallengeable way of making sincere and lasting converts and why can I not say that word today? Penitents, which you know is by solitary confinement." "What do you say? To the system?" inquired Traddles, looking grave. "No, to my accepting the officer and your going with me." "I don't object. So Davy's inviting him to go see Mr. Creakle, which is kind of weird. Who seems to be running a prison. I thought a magistrate was like a judge. But maybe it is like a judge, but also he must have some duties at a prison." "Then I'll write to say so. You remember to say of our treatment, this same Creakle turning his son out of doors, I suppose, and the life he used to lead his wife and daughter?" "Perfectly," said Traddles. "Yet, if you'll read this letter, you'll find he is the tenderest of men to prisoners convicted of the whole calendar of felonies," said I, "though I can't find his tenderness extends to any other class of created beings. So it seems like, according to the letter, Mr. Creakle is now a very kind man, and he's in charge of how the prisoners in the prison are treated, and he tries to treat them very well. So maybe this is one of the penitents, one of the people who feels bad for the bad things that they've done." Traddles shrugged his shoulders and was not at all surprised. I had not expected him to be, and was not surprised myself, or my observation of similar practical satires would have been but scanty. We arranged the time of our visit, and I wrote accordingly to Mr. Creakle that evening, on the appointed day. I think it was the next day, but no matter. Traddles and I repaired to the prison where Mr. Creakle was powerful. It was an immense and solid building, erected at a vast expense. I could not help thinking, as we approached the gate, what an uproar would have been made in the country if any deluded man had proposed to spend 1/2 of the money it had cost on the erection of an industrial school for the young, or a house of refuge for the deserving old. Davy and Traddles are going to this prison, and it's a very big, expensive prison. And what he is thinking is, if they only spent half that money on a school for children who don't have money, or a home for old people who don't have a home, if they only spent half of that money, everybody would be angry. But spending the money on the prison, I guess nobody cares. Everybody is okay with that. In an office that might have been on the ground floor of the Tower of Babel, it was so massively constructed, we were presented to our old schoolmaster, who was one of a group composed of 2 or 3 of the busier sort of magistrates, and some visitors they had brought. He received me like a man who had formed my mind in bygone years, and had always loved me tenderly. He was very abusive. He used to hit them and beat them all the time. But now Davy is famous and very successful, so he's treating them like a father. On my introducing Traddles, Mr. Creakle expressed in Sircon is saying, did he call a school a prison? I'm not sure what your question is. Just to give you some background, Mr. Creakle was the headmaster of a school where Davy and Traddles went to when they were young boys. And Mr. Creakle used to beat them. But now Mr. Creakle, and that was a very long time ago. They were very young. Maybe Davy was like 8 years old or 7 years old at the time. And also Traddles, probably. And then they both left the school at some point. But it was a miserable experience. They made good friends because I think that's what happens in a situation where you're being abused. You kind of make very good friends with all the people there. You have to somehow become like a conspiracy against the authority. And you make very strong friendships. So that's why they're such good friends. So Davy and Traddles left the school. But Mr. Creakle retired from the school. And somehow he became a judge in charge of a prison. So this is his new job, which is, I think, a much higher position, a much more respected position. And Davy's famous now. He's a famous writer. He's becoming very popular and famous as a writer. And he receives a lot of letters from strangers and people from the past. And one of these letters was from Mr. Creakle, who said, remember me? I'm your old headmaster. I'm a magistrate now, I'm a judge, and I'm in charge of this prison. Why don't you come and see the prison one day? I would be happy to show it to you. So, and also in the letter, he explains how he's trying to reform the prisoners. He tries to teach them very well, or he tries to treat them very well, and try to reform them. And Davy's thinking, oh, that's strange. He must have changed, because he used to beat us, but now he tries to reform the prisoners in a nice way. That's kind of interesting. So he says to Traddles, hey, do you want to come with me and see Mr. Creakle? He's a magistrate now, and he's in charge of this prison. He said, I will give you a tour of the prison. And Traddles said, oh, okay. So they go to the prison, and when they see it, it's a very big, expensive prison. And Davy was thinking to himself, if they had used that money to build a school for children with no money, or if they had used that money to build something for old people who don't have any place to live, nobody would pay for it. But because it's a prison, somehow they would spend an enormous amount of money on it. He's just making that observation. But it isn't a school, it's a prison. and Mr. Creakle is in charge of it with a couple of other people. I don't know if that clarifies, because I don't really understand your question too well, but does that clarify your question? And now when they come, Mr. Creakle is acting like he was their father, like their second father. Oh, my boys, like as if he never used to beat them. It's very funny. Well, Sircon says, "Oh, that's strange. How do you go from a schoolmaster to be in charge of a prison?" But actually, it's more. I think it's more. A magistrate is more like a judge than being in charge of a prison. Maybe that's just one of his duties. But Traddles and Davy were just discussing that. They said, "How did he get this job? How did he go from a schoolmaster to this big important job?" And so they were speculating. Speculating means guessing. I don't know. Maybe he gave some politician money, or he did some favor for somebody important, or he did something for someone. Because they don't know either. Like, how did he get that job? They were guessing about that. And then finally they say, well, anyway, now he's a magistrate. Who knows how that happened. Our venerable instructor was a great deal older, and not improved in appearance. His face was fiery as ever. His eyes were small, and rather deeper set. The scanty, wet-looking hair, grey hair, by which I remembered him, was almost gone, and the thick veins in his bald head were none the more agreeable to look at. After some conversation among these gentlemen, from which I might have supposed that there was nothing in the world to be legitimately taken into account but the supreme comfort of the prisoners, at any expense, so this must be some kind of reform. Well, let's check the year. I mean, I think this was written in the 1840s or 1850s. (1850). But I think during that time, during Victorian England, there were a lot of people trying to do social reforms. And I think this is what they're writing about now. Suddenly, instead of punishing prisoners, they want to treat them well and try to educate them and try to make them more useful so that if they are released from prison, it's like a new attitude at the time. Before, I think that people would think that's crazy. But it was this new attitude in Victorian England, some kind of social reform. And that's why they're saying these men, including Mr. Creakle, I think there were 3 of them, 3 magistrates, their only concern was making sure that the prisoners were comfortable and that they could somehow try to lead them in the right direction. So they're all part of this new movement, this new social movement. I might have supposed that there was nothing in the world to be legitimately taken into account. To take something into account means to consider something. So they were only considering the supreme comfort of the prisoners at any expense, and nothing on the wide earth to be done outside the prison doors. We began our inspection. It being then just dinner time, we went first into the great kitchen, where every prisoner's dinner was in the course of being set out separately, to be handed to him in his cell, with the regularity and precision of clockwork. I said aside to Traddles that I wondered whether it occurred to anybody that there was a striking contrast between these plentiful repasts of choice, quality, and the dinners, not to say of the paupers, but of the soldiers, sailors, laborers, the great bulk of the honest working community, of whom not one man in 500 ever dined half so well. So Davy is saying to Traddles, there are honest people who work very hard, or paupers. A pauper is someone who begs in the street. But, that's not a crime. That's not a criminal, a pauper. So Davy is saying, what about paupers and people who work really hard but don't make a lot of money? They don't eat like this. But I learned that the system required high living. And in short, to dispose of the system once for all, I found that on that head and on all others, the system put an end to all doubts and disposed of all anomalies. Nobody appeared to have the least idea that there was any other system but the system to be considered. As we were going through some of the magnificent passages, I inquired of Mr. Creakle and his friends that were supposed to be the main advantages of this. What were supposed to be the main advantages of this all-governing and universally overriding system? I found them to be in perfect isolation of prisoners, so that no one man in confinement there knew anything about another, and the reduction of prisoners to a wholesome state of mind, leading to sincere contrition and repentance. So part of this experiment is that they keep the prisoners, each one prisoner has one cell. So they never meet the other prisoners, they never talk to the other prisoners, and the idea is that by keeping them separately, they have time to sit and reflect about the bad things that they've done, instead of talking with other prisoners and creating trouble. So this is very experimental. Now, it struck me when we began to visit individuals in their cells. Oh, Sirkan, by the way, did you know, because I think that the 18th and 19th century was a time of a lot of social experiments. And I know, Sirkan, you have been watching us, you've been with us, reading along with us, doing Gone with the Wind, which we do in the morning time sometimes. And that takes place in the state of Georgia. And the state of Georgia is actually an experiment in criminal reform. It was founded as one large farm where they would send prisoners from Great Britain. They would send the prisoners to the state of Georgia when it was a colony. And the rules were very strict there. No alcohol, no girls, just hard work and church. So it was like a social prisoner reform movement. That's how the state of Georgia, where Scarlett lives, where Atlanta is, that's how it started. It wasn't like that when they were there. Maybe 100 years earlier, it was like that. But that's how that state was started. Georgia was an experiment, just like this prison is an experiment. Okay, I've lost my place. Jane Roca says, thank you very much for helping us improve our reading skills. May you and all yours, everyone else everywhere be happy. Well, thank you for your kind wishes, Jane. Jane is asking me to pronounce the city. Okay, well, the problem is that sometimes, especially if you have a North American accent like me, that you do not like to pronounce T's in the middle of words. So the way that I pronounce it is Atlanta. No T's. Okay? You can say Atlanta. That's very good. That sounds very nice if you pronounce it Atlanta. But with my particular accent, I don't like to pronounce T's. So I say Atlanta. There is like a little stop. I call it the 50% T, because when you make a T, your tongue starts up at the top like this and it goes down. T, t. You can, if you make that sound, t, you can feel the two parts of the T. T. But a lot of English speakers, it's not just in North America, there are a lot of places in the UK where they don't like to pronounce T's. So what you get is just it's just a stop. So at t. You don't go down, you don't do that part. You just go at Atlanta. You don't do the second part. So I call that the 50% T. All right, let's see. I lost my place. I found them to be the perfect isolation of prisoners, so that no one man in confinement there knew anything about another, and the reduction of prisoners to a wholesome state of mind, leading to sincere contrition. To be contrite means to feel sorry, to feel bad for the things that you've done. And so does repentance. They both mean something very similar. Sircon says a wholesome state of mind leading to sincere contrition and repentance has a religious connotation. Well, repentance is definitely used in a religious context. Contrite, sometimes contrite could be kind of negative. I just want to look up that word. Contrite, feeling or expressing remorse or penitence. I would say that when you talk about being penitent, that seems to have a religious connotation to it. But contrite, when I think of somebody who's being contrite, I picture how they are. I'm sorry. That look is contrite to me. But, so I would say in my mind, I don't know if everybody thinks this way. When you talk about contrition, you're kind of imagining how they look when they feel sad. And when you talk about penitent, you're talking about sincerely feeling bad. And that's definitely used in a religious context. And wholesome, I know what wholesome means. It's a pretty common word, but I can't think of how to explain it. So, good health, physical well-being. But there's something else about wholesome, which I don't think that this definition really describes. Wholesome means like innocent or pure or comfortable, like home. Like if you have a wholesome dinner, yeah, maybe it's healthy, maybe not, but it makes you feel love. So I think a regular prison is not wholesome because all the prisoners talk to each other and they make plans and they fight. That's not wholesome. But this is a wholesome environment because each prisoner has their own room. And so there's no fighting, there's no arguing. It's a place where peace is possible. Let's say that. But I don't think that has a religious connotation. I think the only word in that phrase that has a religious connotation is penitent. Or repenting. Sorry, repenting. It's the same word. Now it struck me when we began to visit individuals in their cells and to traverse the passages in which those cells were, and to have the manner of the going to chapel and so forth explained to us. And there was a strong probability of the prisoners knowing a good deal about each other and of their carrying on a pretty complete system of intercourse. This, at the time I write, has been proved, I believe to be the case, but as it would have been flat blasphemy against the system to have hinted at such a doubt then, I looked out for the penitents as diligently as I could. So Davy was curious, do they really feel sorry about what they've done? Do they really feel penitent? Are they really repenting? And here again, I have great misgivings. I found as prevalent a fashion in the form of the penitents as I had left outside in the forms of the coats and waistcoats in the windows of the tailor's shop. I found a vast amount of profession. Now, you may know profession to mean what you do for a living, but profess means to say something and to mean it, to be sincere, or to really believe it. That's why you have the word professor, someone who stands in front of people and explains things that he really believes, or he really thinks, or says that he knows. So to profess that you are penitent means to say that you're penitent, and to say that you mean it. So professions of penitence means people saying that they are sorry. I found the vast amount of profession, people saying that they're sorry, varying very little in character. So each person seems to be saying, oh, I'm sorry, in exactly the same way, which makes Davy suspicious. Like, why are they all doing it using the exact same words and having the exact same behavior? That's strange to me. I don't think that they really are sorry. I think they're repeating something that they heard. Varying very little, which I thought exceedingly suspicious. Oh, he even says the word suspicious here. Even in words. So each person repeats the same words and looks the same when they say, yes, I'm very sorry for my crimes. I found a great many foxes. You know, the word fox in English is used for people who are very good at tricking other people. So to outfox someone means to trick them. And so when he says, I found a great many foxes, he means very smart liars, or people who can easily trick other people. I found a great many foxes, disparaging whole vineyards of inaccessible grapes. But I found very few foxes whom I would have trusted within reach of a bunch. Above all, I found that the most professing men, so the men who said, I'm sorry the most, were the greatest objects of interest, and that their conceit, their vanity, their want of excitement, and their love of deception, which many of them possessed to an almost incredible extent, as their history showed, all prompted to these professions and were all gratified by them. However, I heard so repeatedly in the course of our goings to and fro of a certain number 27, who was the favorite, and who really appeared to be a model prisoner, and I resolved to suspend my judgment until I should see 27. 28, I understood, was also a bright particular star. But it was his misfortune to have his glory a little dimmed by the extraordinary luster of 27. I heard so much of 27, of his pious admonitions. You know, they are using a lot of words with religious connotation here. They used the word blasphemy earlier, and now they're using the word pious. A pious person is someone who follows the religion, does all the good things, but that's not really a good definition. Let me, but it always sounds very religious to call someone pious. It sounds like someone following the religion perfectly. Pious, making a hypocritical display or virtue, sincere but unlikely to be fulfilled. Oh, well, actually, no, I'm sorry, I missed the first definition, devoutly religious. So, but when you call someone pious, though, you always think of them as being very good. I heard so much of 27, of his pious admonitions to everybody around him, and of the beautiful letters he constantly wrote to his mother, whom he seemed to consider in a very bad way, that I became quite impatient to see him. I had to restrain my impatience for some time, on account of 27 being reserved for a concluding effect. But at last we came to the door of his cell, and Mr. Creakle, looking through a little hole in it, reported to us in a state of greatest admiration that he was reading a hymn book. A hymn, H-Y-M-N, a hymn is a religious song, religious music. So he's sitting in his cell looking at a book of religious songs, learning religious songs. Sircon says, making or constituting a hypocritical display of virtue, as I understood always. Well, you see, that's not how I understand it. I was actually surprised because I Googled pious, because the way I hear that word is always good. You know, that if somebody is pious, it means that they're very careful, well, depending on what you think about religion, but that they're always careful to follow exactly the religion. That's how I've always thought of the word pious. So I was surprised to see under it that it says making a hypocritical display of virtue. I've never heard anyone be accused of being pious, like in a bad way. Or the other definition is a sincere but unlikely to be unfulfilled hope. I don't know. I haven't seen that word being used in a negative way ever. Jane Rocha is saying maybe the author means to sound sarcastic when he's using those terms to refer to the religious meanings. I don't know if he's trying to sound sarcastic. I think what he's trying to do is give a sense that everyone involved in this experimental treatment of the prisoners treats it in a very serious religious way. So if you speak against it, you're blaspheming against it. So the other people will say, "Oh, what are you talking about? How can you say that about our wonderful system?" Because Davy was suspicious, and he was saying, I wanted to ask questions, but I felt like I would be blaspheming them. Like they would be so shocked and horrified at my questions, I couldn't ask. And I think that on the other side, they're using words like pious and penitent to show how strongly they feel about this idea of social reform. So I don't think that it's being used sarcastically. As a matter of fact, another word for prison is penitentiary. I can't even say it. Penitentiary. And maybe, we should look. I'm just going to look up the origin of that word penitentiary, because maybe people started using that word instead of prison in that time period because it became fashionable to try to reform prisoners instead of punishing them. Wait, let me just look up my word origin dictionary. I love to look up word origins. Let's see. The meaning of house of correction and prison in which convicts are confined for punishment and reformation and compelled to labor. The first time it was used was in 1806. So, around that time. This is 50 years later. So, but maybe for 50 years they had started looking at prisons more like a place where they could reform people instead of punishing them, making them feel bad. There was such a rush of heads immediately to see number 27 reading his hymn book that the little hole was blocked. So probably, have you ever seen the prison doors where it's all solid and you just open up a little window? So that's what I think they mean by little holes. Everybody wanted to see prisoner number 27. The little hole was blocked up, 6 or 7 heads deep. To remedy this inconvenience and give us an opportunity of conversation with 27 in all his purity, Mr. Creakle directed the door of the cell to be unlocked and 27 to be invited out into the passage. This was done, and whom should Traddles and I then behold to our amazement in this converted number 27? Uriah Heep. Oh my God. He knew us directly. Now, if you haven't been following this story, Uriah Heep is a horrible, rotten villain throughout the entire story. And he was just ruined several chapters ago. He was doing horrible things to people. And he was discovered and made to go away. And now, including Davy, he did bad things to Davy and all of the people who he loved. And nobody knows what happened to him, but he's prisoner number 27. I'm losing my voice. How do you do, Mr. Copperfield? How do you do, Mr. Traddles? This recognition caused a general admiration in the party. So everybody is like, oh, you know him? He did horrible things to all of them. I rather thought that everyone was struck by his not being proud and taking notice of us. Well, 27, said Mr. Creakle mournfully admiring him. How do you find yourself today? I'm very humble, sir, replied Uriah Heep. In some parts of the UK, they do not like to pronounce H's in the beginning of words. So he's saying humble. I'm very humble. Uriah always talks about being very humble. It's a kind of annoying thing that he does. So when Mr. Creakle asks, how are you? His answer, of course, is, I'm very humble, sir. You are always so, 27, said Mr. Creakle. Here, another gentleman asked, with extreme anxiety, are you quite comfortable? Yes, thank you, sir, said Uriah Heep, looking in that direction. Far more comfortable here than ever I was outside. I see my follies now, sir. That's what makes me comfortable. By the way, you know the word fool, I'm sure. What is a fool? A fool is a stupid person, a person who does stupid things. That's a fool. And folly is related to that word. So follies are stupid things. Stupid things that you do. Ridiculous things that you do. So when Uriah says, I see my follies, that means I see my foolish, stupid things that I do. Now I can see the stupid things that I did. That's what makes me comfortable. Several gentlemen were much affected, and a third questioner, forcing himself to the front, inquired with extreme feeling, how do you find the beef? This is ridiculous. Thank you, sir, replied Uriah, glancing in a new direction of his voice. It was tougher yesterday than I could wish. But it's my duty to bear. I have committed follies, gentlemen, said Uriah, looking round with a meek smile. Meek means shy, weak. With a meek smile. And I ought to bear the consequences without repining. A murmur, partly of gratification at 27's celestial state of mind, and partly of indignation against the contractor who had given him any cause of complaint. a note of which was immediately made by Mr. Creakle, beef too tough. Having subsided, 27 stood in the midst of us, as if he felt himself the principal object of merit in a highly meritorious museum. That we, the neophytes, a neophyte is a beginner, an amateur, that we, the neophytes, might have an excess of light shining upon us all at once. Orders were given to let out 28, and I had been so much astonished already that I only felt a kind of resigned wonder when Mr. Littimer walked forth, reading a good book. All right, in case you are not following the story, Littimer was, well, okay, we have to go back a little bit. Let's do a little review, all right? Do you remember that I told you that Davy and Traddles, the two men who are taking this tour of the prison, when they were little boys, they went to a school together. And Mr. Creakle, who is now in charge of this prison, was the headmaster of the school, and he used to beat them. He used to abuse them very badly. There was another boy at that school, and his name was Steerforth, and Steerforth was an older boy. And he liked Davy, and so he protected Davy from all the other boys. So Davy was very small and young and scared, and Steerforth, who was an older boy at the school, protected him. And because of that, Davy loved him. He really, really loved Steerforth more than anything. And so later, when he was older, when Davy was older and in London, somehow he met Steerforth again. Because they all separated. They all left the school at some point and separated. But sometime in London, they met by accident, by surprise. And it was so wonderful that they could become friends again. And they had a great time. And Davy was so happy to be Steerforth's little brother again. It was wonderful. But Steerforth did a horrible thing. He took a girl who was like Davy's sister, and he ran away with her to Europe, to the continent, to France, to Italy, to Switzerland. And he ruined her life. It doesn't matter to Steerforth. Steerforth is very rich, so it really doesn't matter what he does. But he ruined this girl's life completely. For the rest of her life, it's ruined because of him. And this was a great problem for Davy, and Davy hated him after that. Steerforth had a servant, Littimer, and Littimer was the perfect servant. He was so perfect that Davy used to feel uncomfortable around him, like he wasn't good enough to be around Littimer. But Littimer had helped Steerforth get this girl and run away with her. He was delivering her secret messages, and he even went with them when they ran away to Europe. And so Davy hates Littimer very much. And now Littimer is stepping out of cell 28. "28," said a gentleman in spectacles. Spectacles are glasses. Who had not yet spoken. "You complained last week, my good fellow, of the cocoa. They have chocolate and beef. How has it been since?" "I thank you, sir," said Mr. Littimer. It has been better made. If I might take the liberty of saying so, sir, I don't think the milk which is boiled with is quite genuine, but I am aware that there's a great adulteration of milk in London, and that the article in the pure state is difficult to be obtained." So he's saying, well, it's okay, I guess. The hot chocolate is okay, I guess. I think I want to go spend a couple of weeks in this prison and have beef and hot chocolate every day. But he's saying the milk is probably not pure milk. There's something wrong with it. If something is probably you won't see the word adulterated, but you might see the word unadulterated. And that means that something hasn't been tampered with or changed or altered. But now I just want to make sure I don't trust myself. Adulterate. Poor quality, adding another substance, like adding something to it. So maybe what they do is they get the milk, but to make more money, they put water in it. So the milk is the milk is adulterated. If it were unadulterated, it would be pure milk with nothing else. It appeared to me that the gentleman in spectacles backed his 28 against Mr. Creakle's 27, for each of them looked his own man in hand. So it seems like these men, Mr. Creakle and this other man who's in charge, it's like a game to them. So Mr. Creakle loves number 27, and he's saying he's the best, and I'm responsible for it. And the other man is saying, oh no, it's 28, he's the best, and he's my responsibility. So they're making, it's like a game to them. What is your state of mind, 28? said the questioner in spectacles. I thank you, sir, returned Mr. Littimer. I see my follies now, sir. I am a good deal troubled when I think of the sins of my former companions, sir, but I trust they may find forgiveness. So he doesn't even take responsibility for what he's done. He blames it on the other people that were with him. You are quite happy yourself? Said the questioner, nodding. You are quite happy yourself? Say yes. Say yes. I am much obliged to you, sir, returned Mr. Littimer. Perfectly so. Is there anything at all on your mind now? Said the questioner. If so, mention it, 28. Sir, said Mr. Littimer without looking up, if my eyes have not deceived me, there is a gentleman present who was acquainted with me in my former life. If it may be profitable to that gentleman to know, sir, that I attribute my past follies entirely to having lived a thoughtless life in the service of young men, and to having allowed myself to be led by them into weakness. So he's blaming Steerforth and maybe even Davy for the bad things that he's done. Sirkan says, why has Mr. Littimer become a prisoner? I'm not sure, because I don't think that it was a crime what they did. I mean, they ruined that girl's life for sure. Emily. They ruined Emily's life for sure. But I don't think that he ever really committed a crime. I mean, he's just an employee of that boy. So maybe he did something else or got in trouble some other way. Or maybe that was a crime at the time, having a girl, like helping a girl run off from her family. Maybe we'll see. But he's referring to all of this. He's saying, my only crime was that I was a servant to young men who made me do things. Maybe Steerforth had him do other things. I don't know. Let's see. Which I had not the strength to resist. I hope that gentleman will take warning, sir, and will not be offended at my freedom. It is for his good. I am conscious of my own past follies. I hope he may repent of all the wickedness and sin which he has been a party. Wow. So Littimer is saying that Davy should be in prison too. He's guilty, and he should repent. He hasn't done anything wrong. He hasn't done one thing wrong. That's crazy. I observed that several gentlemen were shading their eyes, each with one hand, as if they had just come into church. This does you credit. 28. When something does someone credit, that means this shows you have a good character. So what you just said shows that you have a very good character, 28. Return to the questioner. I should have expected it of you, if there's anything else. Sir, returned Mr. Littimer, slightly lifting his eyebrows, but not his eyes, there was a young woman who fell into dissolute courses that I endeavored to save. Oh my gosh. So now he's saying there was a young woman who committed some bad acts, did some bad things, and I tried to save her. He didn't. Well, okay, in the end of that story where where Steerforth, his servant, and this girl, this story ended in Italy, and Steerforth ran off. I don't remember why. He abandoned Emily in Italy with Littimer. And the suggestion was made that Emily should marry Littimer, because nobody will ever marry Emily after what happened. And Littimer was saying, okay, yeah, I'll marry her. But she didn't want that, so she ran away. She was locked in a room, and she escaped from this room somewhere in Italy. And then she somehow found her way back to, after a very long time and after being very sick, she somehow returned to England. So, but he's saying, yes, I tried to save her. I offered to marry her. Oh my. He really doesn't see that he's done anything wrong. I beg that gentleman, if he has it in his power, to inform that young woman from me that I forgive her. I forgive her bad conduct towards me, and that I call her to repentance, if he will be so good. So he's saying, if you still know Emily, if you can write to her, tell her I forgive her. Oh, wow. I have no doubt, 28, returned the questioner, that the gentleman you refer to feels very strongly, as we all must. They have no idea what he's talking about. Only Davy and probably Traddles know. What you have said so properly will not detain you. I thank you, sir, said Littimer. Gentlemen, I wish you a good day, and hoping you and your families will also see your wickedness and amend. With this, number 28 retired after a glance between him and Uriah, as if they were not altogether unknown to each other. So it seems like Littimer and Uriah know each other. Through some medium of communication, and a murmur went round the group, as his door shut upon him, that he was a most respectable man and a beautiful case. Now 27, said Mr. Creakle, entering on a clear stage with his man. So now Mr. Creakle has his number 27. Look at my repentant prisoner. Is there anything that anyone can do for you? If so, mention it. I would humbly ask, sir, returned Uriah with a jerk of his malevolent head. Malevolent means like evil. For leave to write again to mother. It shall certainly be granted, said Mr. Creakle. Oh, thank you, sir. I am anxious about mother. I am afraid she ain't safe. Somebody incautiously asked, what from? But there was a scandalized whisper, shh! Immortally safe, sir, returned Uriah. writhing. Uriah moves like a snake. A snake writhes. So immortally safe. He acts like a snake, he looks like a snake, and he moves like a snake, writhing in discretion of his voice. In the discretion of his voice. I should wish, mother, to be got into my state. I never should have been got into my present state if I hadn't come here. I wish mother had come here. It would be better for everybody if they got took up and was brought here. So Uriah is saying everybody in the world could benefit from being here and being reformed. Oh, he's so full of it. Before I come here, said Uriah, stealing a look at us, as if he would be blighted, as if he would have blighted the outer world to which we belonged, if he could. I was given to follies, but now I am sensible of my follies. There's a good deal of sin outside. There's a deal of sin in mother. There's nothing but sin everywhere except here. He's such a liar. Oh, you are quite changed, said Mr. Creakle. Oh dear, yes, sir, cried this hopeful penitent. You wouldn't relapse if you were going out? Asked somebody else. Oh dear, no, sir. Well, said Creakle, this is very gratifying. You have addressed Mr. Copperfield 27. Do you wish to say anything further to him? You knew me a long time before I come here, and was changed, Mr. Copperfield, said Uriah, looking at me. And more villainous look I never saw, even on his visage. Well, let's look at that word visage. A person's face with reference to the form of proportions of the features. A person's facial expression. The surface of an object. So his facial expression. So when he says that, you knew me a long time before I came here and was changed, Mr. Copperfield. The look on his face was so evil, so disgusting. I never saw, even on his visage. You knew me when in spite of my follies I was humble among them that was proud, and meek among them that was violent. And you was violent to me yourself, Mr. Copperfield. Once you struck me a blow in the face, you know. General commiseration. Commiserating is when people talk to each other. So when Uriah said that, all of the people said, "Oh," you can imagine like a lot of people talking. Maybe you don't understand everything they're saying though. Several indignant glances directed at me. So, you struck Uriah Heep? How could you? Uriah Heep ruined the lives of many people. And he's a horrible person, but they're saying, how could you strike Uriah Heep? But I forgive you, Mr. Copperfield, said Uriah, making his forgiving nature the subject of a most impious. So here we have impious, which means, well, actually, we better check. Impious. Not showing respect or reverence, especially for a god. So you see, pious is being good or respecting God. That's how I think of it. But so I was surprised at those other definitions. But so the opposite is not showing respect or reverence for God. A most impious and awful parallel, which I shall not record. I forgive everybody. It would ill become me to bear malice. Malice means like wanting to do bad things to people. feeling bad intentions for people. I freely forgive you, and I hope you'll curb your passions in future. I hope Mr. W will repent, and Miss W and all that sinful lot. Oh, wow. He's talking about Mr. W is Mr. Wickfield, and Miss W is Miss Wickfield, his daughter. Uriah was living in their house, and Mr. Wickfield was kind of an alcoholic, so Uriah used to give him a lot of liquor. Uriah was his employee. He was his boss. And Uriah used to give him more and more alcohol and make him sign papers. And eventually, he signed all of the property and all of the things that Mr. Wickfield owned to Uriah. And he took over the business of Mr. Wickfield. And he was planning to marry Agnes. That's Miss W. That's Miss Wickfield. And he was manipulating the father and blackmailing the father to agree to let him marry Agnes. That's why Davy slapped him. He said, "You'll never, ever marry Agnes, you disgusting snake." And now he's saying, Mr. W and Miss W should repent, so they should feel bad. He was destroying their lives. He stole everything from them. And all that sinful lot. You've been visited with affliction, and I hope it may do you good. But you'd better have come here. Mr. W had better have come here. Miss W too. She's a young lady. I mean, he's saying all these people need to come here and repent. Oh gosh. The best wish I could give you, Mr. Copperfield, and give all you gentlemen, is that you could be took up and brought here. When I think of my past follies and my present state, I'm sure it would be best for you. I pity all who ain't brought here. He sneaked back to his cell amidst a little chorus of approbation, and both Traddles and I experienced a great relief when he was locked in. It was a characteristic feature. Is this the last chapter? Wait a minute. Okay, no, just a few more pages. I thought, oh my gosh, maybe this is the last chapter. Okay. It was a characteristic feature in this repentance that I was fain to ask what these two men had done to be there. So because of all this craziness, Davy forgot to ask why they were actually in prison. Neither one of them ever had encounters with the police. Yes, Uriah Heep did a lot of bad things, but they said, okay, give us back everything that you stole, and we will not contact the police. So Uriah was forced to return everything that he stole. And then they said, okay, no, we never want to see you again. Get out of here. So we don't really know what Uriah did to be in prison. Same thing with Litimer. Nobody said what he did. I addressed myself to one of the two warders. A warder, that's like it's like a police for a jail. Ward, it comes from the same word as guard. So a warden in North America, I don't know about, I think also in the UK, a warden, W-A-R-D-E-N, and it comes from the same word as guard. A warden is the person who is in charge of the prison. That's like the manager of the prison. So the wards are probably prison guards. Warders, guarders. So I addressed myself to one of the two warders, who I suspected from certain latent indications in their faces knew pretty well what all this stir was worth. So the guards, all the managers, they're very impressed. Oh, we're doing such a wonderful job reforming these criminals. But the warders, the guards, they're like, nah. They deal with them all the time, every day. They know that they're lying and full of it. We would say they're full of it. Do you know, said I, as we walked along the passage, what felony was number 27's last folly? The answer was that it was a bank case, a fraud on the Bank of England. I asked, yes, sir, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy, he and some others. He set the others on. It was a deep plot for a large sum. Sentence, transportation for life. 27 was the knowingest bird of the lot, and had very nearly kept himself safe, but not quite. The bank was just able to put salt upon his tail, and only just. Do you know 28? So Uriah Heep was in jail for committing bank fraud. He had a group of people with him, and they were trying to somehow, not by robbing the bank with a gun, but by signing papers and making fake documents, trying to steal money from the bank. And now Litimer. Do you know 28's offense? 28, returned my informant, speaking throughout in a low tone and looking over his shoulder. Wow, I wonder what he did, as we walked along the passage, to guard himself from being overheard in such an unlawful reference to these immaculates by Creakle and the rest. So he didn't want Creakle and all the other people to hear that they were talking about 28. Also transportation, got to a place and robbed a young master of a matter of 250 pounds in money and valuables, the night before they were going abroad. I particularly recollect his case from his being took by a dwarf. Oh, wow. Wait a minute. Wait, let me read the rest. I'll explain this in a minute, okay? But I just want, I'm not exactly sure what it means for his being took by, see, okay, I'm just going to tell you something. First of all, I don't know if you know what a dwarf is, maybe, and if you haven't been following the story at this point, let me just show you what a dwarf is. A dwarf is a small person. So this is a dwarf. And in the story, at some point, when Davy is with his friend Steerforth, that was the master of Litimer before all the craziness happened. One time, Steerforth, when he was with Davy, was visited by a woman who was a dwarf. And she's a very funny lady. She's a very interesting lady. She's very, very small. And she makes her money by doing cosmetics for rich people. And I think rich people throughout the country enjoy having her come and visit because she's so unusual. And she's funny. She's a very funny person. But you get the feeling that she's a very nice person. And when this scandal happened, when Steerforth ran away with this girl, she came to Davy and she said, I didn't know anything about it. I had no idea. And she was very sorry. She was very penitent at even knowing Steerforth. And you believe her. But now, I don't know if she got the police involved and she found the police and she brought the police to Latimer, or if she's working with him. Let's see. I have no idea. Because, let's see, I particularly recollect his case as his being took by a dwarf. See, I don't know what took means here. Maybe we'll find out in a minute. A what? A little woman. I forgot her name. Not Mocher. That's it. He had eluded pursuit and was going to America in a flaxen wig and whiskers, and such a complete disguise as never you see in all your born days, when the little woman... Oh, so she wasn't... She was innocent. She knew him. She was very angry when Litimer and Steerforth ran away with that girl. She was very, very hurt and angry. So, and I believed it when I read that she was very sorry, and she wanted revenge. So she got revenge, because what Litimer did was he was working for a young boy, and he stole 250 pounds, and now he was trying to run away to America, and he was wearing a disguise, a wig and a beard. But Miss Mocher, the dwarf, saw him, and she said, "There he is, get him." Let me reread. I'll reread that paragraph. "That's it," he alluded, "pursuit, and was going to America in a flaxen wig and whiskers, and such a complete disguise as never you see in all your born days, when the little woman, being in Southampton, met him walking along the street, picked him out with her sharp eye in a moment, ran betwixt his legs to upset him, and held on to him like grim death." "Excellent, Miss Mocher," cried I. "You'd have said so if you'd had seen her standing on a chair in the witness box at the trial, as I did," said my friend. "He cut her face right open and pounded her in the most brutal manner when she took him, but she never loosed her hold till he was locked up. She held so tight to him, in fact, that the officers were obliged to take 'em both together. She gave her evidence in the gamest way, and was highly complimented by the bench, and cheered right home to her lodgings. She said in court that she'd have took him single-handed, on one account of what she knew concerning him, if he had been Samson, and it's my belief she would. It was mine too, and I highly respected Miss Mocher for it. We had now seen all there was to see. It would have been in vain to represent to such a man as the worshipful Mr. Creakle that 27 and 28 were perfectly consistent and unchanged, that exactly what they were then they had always been, that the hypocritical knaves were just subjects. You know, we had that word knave earlier today, and I forgot already what it means. Well, it's funny because maybe we have to look at knavish, because if you just look up knave, it doesn't say knavish. Unscrupulous, dishonest. So a knave could be like a liar, but it's not used anymore. It says it's archaic. People don't use that word anymore. That the hypocritical knaves were just the subjects to make that sort of profession in such a place, that they knew its market value, at least as well as we did. In the immediate service, it would do them. They were expatriated. To be expatriated means to be sent out of the country, so probably they were sent to Australia. In a word, that it was a rotten, hollow, painfully suggestive piece of business altogether. We left them to their system and themselves, and went home wondering. "Perhaps it's a good thing, Traddles," said I, "to have an unsound hobby ridden hard, for it's sooner ridden to death." "I hope so," said Traddles. Okay, well that was the end of chapter 61. So next time, probably tomorrow, I'm sure tomorrow, unless I have an internet problem like I have been having recently. So tomorrow we will read chapter 62, A Light Shines My Way. And there probably are only one or two chapters left, so we're getting very close to the end. All right, well, thank you for watching, and thank you for all of your questions and comments, and I hope that you will watch tomorrow when we get close to the end of David Copperfield. Good night.